I don't think there's anything in the world that messes with your confidence quite like not feeling comfortable in your own body, especially when you're doing everything right and still gaining weight or feeling like crap. You're eating clean, you're working out, maybe you're tracking every bite, and yet you're still miserable. If that sounds familiar, especially if you're over 40, today's episode is going to connect a lot of dots. Because, spoiler alert, it's never about willpower, it's about how all the systems in your body are actually functioning. And there's a real science to fixing it. Welcome to the Feel Better, Live Free podcast brought to you by Thinlicious. I'm your host, Ruth Sukup, and here we'll talk about everything from the science of weight loss to practical tips for making your health a priority in the midst of a busy life. It's a little bit nerdy, a little bit funny, and a little bit revolutionary. So buckle up, friend, because it's about to get real. Hey there, and welcome back to the Feel Better, Live Free podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ruth Sukup, and I'm the founder of Thinlicious and the creator of the Thin Adapted System, as well as the New York Times bestselling author of 7 books. And today we are chatting with Becca Chilczenko. It's a hard name to say. A board-certified hormone specialist and the co-founder of Fit Mom, a functional health practice that helps women heal from chronic issues like hormone imbalance, gut dysfunction, autoimmune challenges, and stubborn weight loss resistance. Becca's own story started with intense workouts and a major health crashes in her 20s, but now she helps women who are doing all the right things but still feeling completely stuck. And in today's conversation, we are diving deep into how your body's systems all work together: your liver, your lymphatic system, your gut, your hormones, and why ignoring one can keep you from making progress in all the others. She even walks us through a real client case study to show us exactly how she works through symptoms and creates a healing roadmap that actually works. It's fascinating. This one is packed with so many eye-opening insights, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. So let's jump in with Becca Chilczenko. Becca, thanks so much for being here today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thank you. I am super excited for this conversation. I feel like we already have a vibe going, so I think it's going to be great.
Yes. Well, I mean, I feel like the topics that we're going to cover today are pretty relevant to everybody, but let's just start with like little background. Tell us who you are, what you do, and how you got to be doing what you do now.
Yeah. So my name is Becca Chilczenko. I am a board certified functional practitioner, and I specialize in female hormones and metabolic dysfunction. So I have a private practice of, a team of 5 of us that work with what I consider very complex cases. I'm not sure how we ended up in that place of, it seems like the people that can't be solved anywhere else come to our doorstep. But we work with all females dealing with chronic issues, whether it's autoimmune based, gut based, hormone based, weight loss resistance. We kind of see it all. And we see people that are already doing everything right, which I think is a lot of people, I'm sure, listening, and they still struggle. And those are the people that we love helping. And that's, kind of my journey and why I got into it. So that is me in a nutshell and what I do now.
Awesome. Well, walk us through that a little bit. Like, what does that look like? What is it? Give us an example of a complex case and how you would sort of walk somebody through that.
Oh, great question. So I have one case that comes to mind in particular. I'm working with her currently. So she came to me. She has a history. She actually did bodybuilding shows and physique shows. So you can imagine kind of the extreme diets that her body was put through and conditions that her body was put through. And she's in her 30s. She's a mom of 3, and she's a personal trainer right now. So leads a very healthy lifestyle, right? She works out quite often. She eats very healthy, lots of protein. But she came to me because she was dealing with pretty debilitating symptoms on all accounts. So she had her gallbladder removed after one of her pregnancies. So we know without a gallbladder, we're going to have a lot of issues with detoxification and bile flow. And typically it leads to, at some point, lots of digestive, nervous system, sometimes estrogen-based issues. And so she was having 24-day cycles. So very short cycles at the age of, early mid 30s. And they were basically half of her month was awful. So
Oh,
she basically gets horrible breast tenderness leading into her period. She gets extreme mood fluctuations to where she can't handle any type of stress. She struggles to be the mom that she wants to be. And then when the period comes, it's extremely heavy, very big clots, lots of bleeding, just all around horrible. She also has bloating after she has a bowel movement. So a lot of people feel like more relieved after they have bowels. She actually gets more bloated and distended after bowel movements.
wow.
And she has bloating after water and drinks, even, and basically all meals. And she goes to the bathroom, but still experiences a lot of these horrible digestive symptoms. Her energy is pretty low. And so, all around, just like for someone that lives a very healthy life, per se, she's struggling on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis.
I feel bad for her just listening to
Yeah,
this story. I'm like,
yeah,
oh, this
I
poor
know.
woman.
I know. And she's actually a good friend. She's someone that reached out to me and I've known. And so even more so, like I'm attached to helping her feel better. But the crazy thing is a lot of people would think like, oh, really heavy periods, bad periods, her hormones must be imbalanced. Hormone levels were totally normal, according to lab work. So this is a situation where some people genetically feel their hormones more than other people. So this can be sometimes due to inflammation levels. It can be due, though, also to certain genetic mutations that cause you to experience your hormone fluctuations a lot more intensely. And we see this with like PMDD. It happens where they may have totally normal levels of hormones, but they feel the hormone changes that happen in your cycle so much more. And so with a client like this, we have to, in a lot of cases, go through the trenches of like, we might feel a little bit worse before we feel better because she is not detoxing. Well, we know that she doesn't have a gallbladder. She's dealing with this horrible bloating and distension every time she eats. So we know she's not moving bile well. That typically is a clear indication. And bile is kind of like a taxi cab for your toxins. And so if you don't have good bile flow with a lack of a gallbladder, we know right off the bat, like you are not clearing things from your body. And so when we start with every client, we typically do a pretty drastic diet adjustment. Main reason being because most of the people that come to us eat very similar foods all the time because they have narrowed down to like what they feel they can handle, right? They've removed all the foods that they think are causing the issue. So they're on a very limited diet. And that can become part of the problem because if you have an immune based issue and if you have leaky gut and all those things going on, what happens is those foods that you're eating can leak into the bloodstream and the immune system starts to create an attack because it's a foreign invader. Food particles shouldn't get into the bloodstream, just nutrients, hydration. So with a leaky gut and with all of these issues going on, sometimes the foods you're actually eating are perpetuating the problem. And
Mm,
so we do pretty drastic diet variations with our clients up front because that alone can start to calm down inflammation. It's basically like
interesting.
blank canvas, right? You basically take away all the things that the immune system might have been responding to, including some of the healthy foods you were probably eating
Yeah.
to get things calmed down at first because that's
Yeah.
part of the problem. Is like there's just so much inflammation and so much activation.
So, can I ask a clarifying
Yeah.
question before you keep going?
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt your flow,
You're
but
fine.
I'm curious, is it like that they're because they're eating such a limited diet and they're eating so many of the same foods that their body is now building up resistance to those foods, even though those foods may have been fine before? Or is it because they're eating too many foods and you have to eliminate even more?
No, so it's basically the foods were never the beginning of the problem. They became part of the problem.
Okay.
So they were dealing with these, they probably started to limit their diet because they were experiencing symptoms already. They were experiencing, bloating or constipation or loose stools or energy issues or weight issues. So they started to narrow down their foods and maybe it helped initially, but now it's you're feeling awful all the time and you're like, but these are the foods that I feel like I can handle kind of, but now those foods have also become part of the problem because
Mm,
most people don't eat a very varied diet. If
right.
and they eat healthy, but if you really think about it, a lot of people eat the same vegetables, the same fruits, the same proteins,
Yeah.
and they're healthy foods. But diet variation is such a huge key to overall health and microbiome health and all of that. And so what I'm talking about with the calming of the immune system and changing of the diet is that when people have this over responsive immune system due to basically for a lack of, to kind of simplify it, a crossover of too many chemical, physical, and emotional stressors. So that could
Mm-hmm.
be a bacteria, a COVID infection, that was part of a really high stress time that you were already dealing with low hormones. And now you just have this crossover of too many things, right? And so it's this activation of the immune system that the immune system starts to get too launched. And we know when the immune system goes off, inflammation happens, right? That's how it's
Mm-hmm.
built. It's supposed to do it that way. But
Right.
the problem is when that inflammation happens too much, too frequently, and the body's cleaning service that comes around after that initial inflammation can't keep up. And so
Mm.
now we just have this chronic inflammation that just builds and builds, and people keep trying to diet it away and they keep trying to exercise it away, and it just makes it worse. And so
Yes.
with the diet variation, what I'm talking about as part of the problem is you have now, because of this inflammation, because of the stress, whatever is going on, you've developed an basically poor gut function. So like whether it's low stomach acid, whether it's inflammation in the GI system, we start to develop this leaky gut where the cell lining wall opens more than it should. And like I mentioned earlier, the only things that should really get out of the GI system, so your GI system, I say, goes from your mouth to your butt. It's basically this long mucousy tunnel, and it shouldn't it's basically like imagine a tunnel underneath a ocean. Like you don't want things getting in and out of that tunnel other than what is supposed to. And so what is supposed to is nutrients from broken down food and hydration.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get this leaky gut and these cell walls start to open too much, food particles, bacteria, all of these things can start to get into the bloodstream. And so that healthy salad that you just ate, that you eat every day and you have for the past 6 months, those food particles are getting into the bloodstream. The body sees that as a foreign invader. And so now
Mm.
it starts to create antibodies against those food particles. So now the
Okay.
food has now also become part of the problem. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
And
so
but
then
but then again, just to clarify, is that that's because you're eating that every day, your body is building up a specific tolerance to that specific
yes.
food. Okay.
Yeah. So that is where the diet variation and the way that we often will do it at some point in the process is we do carb pulsing every few days because you have this 0 to 72 hour window of the initial immune system. And so if you're changing foods every 3 days, going from maybe high carb to low carb or carnivore to keto, honestly, it really doesn't matter. It's just that
Mm-hmm.
you're drastically kind of changing back and forth in a healing process. This is not like people are like, oh my God, I need to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
No, like in an acute healing phase, this is
Yeah.
one way we calm down the immune system because if it's never
Interesting.
able to build this attack against these foods, you can start to calm down the inflammation response and calm down the immune activation.
Interesting. This
Yeah.
is very interesting because I have not heard this specifically in terms of like, I know the importance of variety, right? Like
Yeah.
you talk about all these different elements, but specifically that if you're dealing with, you're doing everything right, but you're still having problems, that this could be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
very, very, very interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so keep going because I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm invested in this story now. I got to know what happens.
So we take every client through what we call kind of like an initial cleanse phase. And the main reason we do this is we pull back stressors because most of the people coming to us, their body is just at max. Like they cannot handle any type of stress. They're mentally, emotionally taxed. They're not recovering from workouts. Like it's just their bodies can't handle anything. And so we look at what can we control. We typically pull back exercise because for most of these people, even though exercise is great, if you are in a super stressed and inflamed state, exercise is a stressor. And
Yeah.
if you're especially if you're working out 5 days a week, your body
Yeah.
can't recover from that. You're not
Especially if you're a
recovering.
personal trainer and you're used to working out hard.
And she knows how to push her body. And so in
Yeah.
her case, we actually took exercise away completely for 2 weeks
Oh,
and
did
just
she die?
walking. She was not happy with me. So just just walking, just, incline walks. I'm okay with some sauna and cold therapy if you want to do that. Stretching, but yeah, would just pull back that stressor.
Yeah.
And then we also, again, drastically change up diet. So we bring in essentially overhaul lots of fruits and vegetables, like 60 grams of fiber a day. No one eats that much normally. And the
Right.
reason being is because what we're trying to do is we're trying to open up liver detoxification pathways, support lymphatic flow, and at the same time stimulate the adrenals, the thyroid, the gut, and the liver. Main reason we want to stimulate those is I am typically feeding people up during this time. So I want to make sure they use that food and calories properly and we don't store it, right? We don't get inflamed more or gain more weight. And we're doing typically, adaptogens or adrenal glandulars, thyroid supports, whether it's a multivitamin or a glandular based on blood work. And then we typically put in lots of B vitamins and medical foods, we call them, but they're basically like powders that have a ton of nutrients and vitamins and are specific to liver and inflammation support.
Gotcha.
So we do smoothies, we do lots of fruits and vegetables. We have them eating regularly throughout the day, and we actually do a ton of water up front and then pull
Interesting.
back water a little bit. So we do like a gallon and a half to 2 gallons a day, and then we
Oh,
pull it back to
wow.
it for 2 days only, 2 days. And
Huh.
then we pull it back. And the reason we do this is because it basically floods the lymphatic system and it gets it to flush. And so it's kind
Oh,
of like a little manipulation of water weight. And people
yeah.
tend to drop a lot of inflammation then in that first week or two, which helps them
Okay.
immediately feel better usually. But the whole goal of the process in this first few weeks is to basically build back up adrenal function and get them fed and renourished as much as possible, as well as drastically changing diet to calm down the immune system, right?
Interesting.
So you got to open up liver, open up detox, and then we usually get into like gut shocking and microbiome manipulation, and that's where we do the carb pulsing usually. Bring in some, eradication agents, bring bacteria levels down a little bit, and then we get into the fun stuff of, truly calming the immune system of
Yeah.
fasting and
This
autophagy.
is
And
intense. So
I know,
how do you handle the gallbladder? Because I
yeah,
find with a lot of my clients have had gallbladder
absolutely.
removed. And so that becomes an issue for
Hmm.
all the reasons that you mentioned, also because it's harder to process fat and we're, advocating for a lot of
Hmm.
healthy fats. So
Yep.
how do you handle that?
Yeah. So in a gallbladder situation, we have to kind of understand how extreme it is for that person, right? And that's why we don't usually bring in like any type of high fat or ketosis based diet until we've tested the waters a little bit. And whenever someone has a gallbladder removed, I almost always, I do always include bile, additional external bile support. So that could
Mm,
be, beta plus is a really common one. But because the gallbladder serves a lot of purposes, and although medical world sees it as like a non-necessary organ, it's pretty necessary. Like
right.
our lymphatic system drains through the gallbladder and the liver, and so now we have a detox system that doesn't have as adequate of places to drain to. Our gallbladder stores the bile, and when we don't have that, it leaks into the small intestine improperly, which causes a lot of cases SIBO or autoimmunity. Those are really common on the back end of gallbladder removals. And then we also see nervous system issues because when there's chronic stress, what a lot of times we'll see, and most women can relate to this, but you go through life and you just never stop. Like we don't honor downtime in our lives anymore as females. And so we're constantly stimulating cortisol, which results in an adrenaline release. And that affects the hormone aldosterone, which impacts sodium and water. And so if you think about chronic cortisol, chronic adrenaline, and now this aldosterone basically stressing out your sodium water balance constantly, you're now stressing the lymphatic system. And this is why chronic stress leads to, for most women at some point, swelling, inflammation, rapid weight gain, because you're swollen. Your lymphatic system can no longer handle the stress that you've been putting on it and the detoxification. And now we don't have a gallbladder. And so we don't have that drainage system open. We don't have the bile, which I mentioned earlier. Bile is basically the taxi cab for removal of any type of toxin, hormone, whatever it might be. So if you don't have a healthy place to store that and release it as you should, think of like a faucet. When you need to turn on a faucet really hard to get a ton of water out, that's your gallbladder being able to push a ton of bile out. Or slowly if you need it. When you don't have a gallbladder, all you get is a drip. And
Mm,
so you don't have that resource to help support the highs and lows that your body sometimes needs to go through with detoxification. So
hmm.
the lack of a gallbladder creates a ton of issues, honestly, long term. It's like the one thing I wish, I think it's probably the most, next to hysterectomies, probably the most unnecessary surgery in a lot of cases. I'm not saying never, I never say never, but like it is rare that a gallbladder has to be removed.
Yeah.
It's the tool that
It's
the
just so
medicine has.
common
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
we could probably go off on a big tangent about
Yes.
modern medicine and all of the things, but we won't.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
won't. My
So
audience has heard me rant about that
bile
before.
support, bile support, bitter foods. I like
Okay.
bitters. Digestive bitters are great
Mhm.
for bile flow and supporting the gallbladder. Uh, exercise, all of those movement,
So
hydration
there
is
are things that you
huge.
can do if you've had your gallbladder
Yeah.
removed, but you have to be very intentional about it, sounds
Yeah.
like. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So keep going.
Yeah. So, anyways, we went through the initial cleanse phase, and here's the thing that a lot of people, and hers is an extreme case. I gave you an extreme case, but in her situation, she started to feel worse. And the
Ooh.
reason that she started to feel worse was because, remember, I took away her exercise, I took away her stressors, and I took away the things that stimulate dopamine. Her body was so used to such a high level of dopamine because, again, she comes from that background, that hustle background, that always push, always do more. And as soon as I brought her dopamine levels down from sky high to kind of normal, she felt like death, because what we get over time is basically an insensitivity. It's called anhedonia, is what it's called. It's basically dopamine deafening. But when you go from this extreme dopamine level to now I feel like I don't feel anything, that is this resensitization that has to happen. And it'll typically last about 30 to 60 days or so. And so,
Whoa.
depending on how extreme the person is,
Yeah.
hers is an extreme case. And so, what I usually do in those cases, we know adrenals are likely shot. We know she's been used to this like extreme. You can do a couple things. Lion's mane can be helpful. There's some peptides that can be helpful too for base, and
Okay.
phosphatidylcholine all help with cellular health and like sensitivity to hormones. But then we overhaul the adrenals. So I'm talking like 4 to 5 grams of vitamin C a day, adrenal adaptogens, B vitamins, all the things, because the adrenals are just going to soak it all up. They're so fatigued that they need like heavy hitters. I'm not like a normal dose of ashwagandha is not going to do it in this case. So in her situation, we are now overhauling the adrenals and slowly opening up detoxification pathways. So we go about a month and things have not improved, which I didn't honestly, I expected they weren't going to get that much better before we went through the hard, and I knew that was going to happen. And it was
Yeah.
a constant discussion
She's
with her
still
of like,
staying your friend and
she
through all
is,
of this?
she is. And she knew she had to do it. She also didn't disclose all the symptoms that she was experiencing until we
Oh,
started. And I was like, okay, well, I didn't know this was going on, right? And so once we get to the gut work, we're finally starting to get a little bit of improvement around the cycles. And we were using more of like a yam-based support for progesterone called Progon B, but I decided to put in progesterone HRT because in these types of cases, they do better with actually lower estrogen and strong progesterone support. So we've been pushing estrogen detox pretty heavily on top of I brought in a progesterone support, and we actually brought in a low dose GLP-1 because they are very anti-inflammatory. And in her
oh,
case,
interesting.
and a lot of people use them for weight loss, obviously, blood sugars, all of those things. But
Mhm.
in cases, a lot of times, I actually use them to help calm inflammation down faster.
Interesting.
And so with those on top of diet variation, we actually went 3 days of carnivore, 3 days of Mediterranean, back and forth, back and forth.
Okay.
Those few things together have now gotten her to a place where her periods are 28, or her cycles are 28 days instead of 24.
That's
She
big.
doesn't have any breast tenderness, any mood swings, or anything of that nature. And she doesn't even really notice her periods coming. And so we're much, much better on the hormone front, which I figured would probably happen first. And then we're working on the bloating has gone down like 50 to 60%. Still there a little bit. That will take some more time. We haven't gotten into the deep fasting with her. And the energy is starting to slowly come back online. And so that's kind
Wow.
of like an extreme case that
Yeah. So it's a process.
yeah.
But I think it's so fascinating to hear this. And hopefully, most people listening are not like feeling to this extreme, but it's possible, right?
Mhm.
But just to hear that, because I think one of the things that I find with my clients when we start going through, like you start changing the way that you eat, and
Mhm.
obviously there's these kind of extreme cases where even when you're doing everything right, there's still going to be issues, and that's why it's so helpful to have this conversation. But I think also we're such an instant gratification culture. And even like I like blame the biggest loser, right? Like we used to watch that show and I used to be obsessed with that show, but where they would lose like 20 pounds every week, right? And they'd go get on the scale and be below the yellow line, but they'd have these massive like weight drops every week, week after week after week. And so then my clients, when I'm like, no, you're half a pound in a week is like normal. That's like where you're supposed to be, right? You're healing your body. This is going to happen. Like you got to be patient. It feels like nothing's happening, but things are actually happening. So, but when you hear like really talking about that, I mean, what you're doing, because I don't know how long this has been now. It sounds like a couple months that you've been working with her, and you're not there yet. And that this wasn't even a weight loss case necessarily, but just to heal your body really, like, it takes time, and it's so hard for people to find the patience to actually like go through the muck in order to get to the good stuff on that. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, we always talk to our clients around expectations, right? And having worked with as many cases as we have, we're pretty good at understanding like how long something's going to take for someone. And then the other piece that I always go back to is like, I don't control what you do. I give you the insight on what to do, but like I'm not living with you holding your hand every step of the way. So that's going to play a role too in terms of how much you're adhering and how much you're telling me and how, and I never blame my clients, but like I can give you all the information and all of the knowledge,
Yeah.
but you have to implement it and actually adhere and be
Yes.
consistent with it. And
That's so good.
so there's that piece, but it's always a conversation. And I think being able to explain to someone physiologically what's going on in their body helps them understand on getting through the hard piece. So like in her
Yes.
case, she had such sluggish and backed up detoxification. Once we started opening that, things start moving around the body. And when that happens, it releases inflammation through lipopolysaccharide release. Like there's things that start flowing that weren't flowing. They were there creating issues, but they were a little bit more silent issues. And now once we start moving them out of the body, you're going to start feeling a certain way for a little
You're
bit.
gonna
Like
feel
we're
it.
going to have to work through the symptoms of that time.
Yeah.
And so I always say
So
something
good.
like in a lot of cases, symptoms are a good sign because you were having them either way. Now we're actually moving through stuff and moving things out of the body. And so
Yes.
those symptoms all take sometimes and we minimize them as much as we can, right? There's a lot of tools you can do, better hydration, lymphatic massages, Epsom salt baths, binders, things like that. But in those cases, like it's a process. And I need to get to the point where we can get your body to handle the stress of exercise or fasting or some of the deeper work that we need to do. And you came to me totally bottomed out.
Yeah.
And so I can't put you through the ringer of what I need to do until you can handle that ringer. And so that's the
Yeah.
time that sometimes it takes to get people more resilient, right? To be able to handle the deeper work that sometimes we need to
Yeah.
do.
So at what point do you go like what's the cutoff for people, right? Like I don't know if this question is making sense because I'm just making it up on the fly. Totally going off script here. But
Okay.
so because I've been thinking about this, right? Like for most people, the vast majority of people who have been eating a standard American diet, which is highly inflammatory, right? They're eating all the crap, they're eating all the sugar, they're eating all the nonsense. You switch to a program like mine where we tell people, like, let's get more protein, let's get more healthy fats, let's cut out the sugar, right? Like the
Yeah.
basic stuff that is going to help you feel better for the vast majority of people, that is going to be enough. But what you're talking about and where you take your clients is when they're doing they're doing the right things, they're living a healthy lifestyle, they're eating the right things, they're cut out sugar already, and they're still not seeing progress. So how do you know, you're just being impatient, right? Because it takes time no matter
Yeah.
what you do. If you're here and then you need to get here, it's going to take time. How do you know that you've actually hit that like point of resistance
Yeah.
where this isn't working, this isn't enough, and there might be a deeper issue that I need to deal with? Like, is there a
Yeah, it's a great
certain
question.
is there a
I go off
certain time?
symptoms. I go off
Yeah.
symptoms and time frame of symptoms. So
Okay.
like some examples. If someone has bloating, and the way that I explain bloating, because a lot of people get bloating confused with just like extra added belly weight, and it's not the same. Like bloating is you eat and you have either pain or distension in your stomach after eating. Like that is bloating. If you are having pretty severe bloating more than a few times a week for more than a month, something's going on. Like
Okay.
that's a symptom and a time frame that I would be like, this isn't normal. Check the foods, right? Are you trying dairy, and dairy is not a great food for, like, look at obvious things that could be going on. Are you chewing your food? Are you drinking too much water around your meals? Right? Like those things that we always think about. But that's one example. Another example, you aren't sleeping, and or you're sleeping, but you wake up unrested. So you're waking
Mm,
up and you have no energy, or you need a nap throughout the day. If that is going on and there is no immediate known reason, like you were sick or you're in a really high stress period and maybe you are getting less sleep, like I'm talking, no, you're doing the things and you're still not sleeping well and you're still not feeling energy throughout the day for at least a few 3 to 4 weeks plus. That's another one that I would say, okay,
okay.
something's going on. Cycles, I always give 2 to 3. So like any PMS or period related issues, I always give 2 to 3 cycles, because any type of change you make to influence hormones are going to take a full 3 months to reflect, mainly because of how our follicles develop, and they have about a 3 month life. And so you need, what you're doing now is like planting the seed for what it's going to feel in 2 to 3 months. So anything cycle related, I give it 2 to 3 months to kind of
Okay.
monitor.
Is that
Um,
true even if you're in perimenopause?
Not necessarily, because if you're having irregular periods in perimenopause, it's hard to obviously, measure month over month, because you're
Yeah,
not having, things
because
normally
it's
happening.
just
It's
all
all over the
messed up
place.
anyways.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that inflammation and metabolic dysfunction are the two biggest drivers of worsening perimenopause symptoms. So like
Mm,
night sweats, hot flashes, bleeding, irregular cycles, all of those things are worsened if you have underlying inflammation or metabolic dysfunction. So it matters a lot lifestyle wise. And if you're making those
yeah.
changes and you're still seeing issues, then, we're talking something else is going on. So I use a kind of general theme here. Things are going on that don't make you feel great for more than a month or two.
For more than a month after making. So, how long would you give it to make the lifestyle changes and then
Yes.
know?
I would say 3 to 6 months
3 to 6
of
months lifestyle changes,
consistency.
and then you're still seeing those issues
Yeah.
for a
For a
month.
couple of months. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
That's good to know. I think that's really helpful to understand that time frame, because again, like we always want that instant gratification. Like, I've been doing this for 2 weeks. Why am I not seeing more changes? Why have I not lost more weight? Right? Like,
Yes.
sorry, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that fast, but it doesn't mean that there might not be an issue. And it's
Yeah.
like the definition of crazy is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So if you have been doing it for a while, but I love that, to give that like 3 to 6 months
Mhm.
lifestyle change. If then you're still seeing issues, there might be something else going on.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
it's
so
so
just
hard to be
like
patient.
baseline things that should be happening in an optimal body. You should be having a normal, non-straining bowel movement 1 to 2 times a day. So like if you're going to the bathroom twice or 3 times a week, that's not okay. That's a huge issue. You should
Mm,
be being able to sleep 7 to 8 hours without waking up much and wake up feeling energized. You shouldn't feel tired midday. You should have energy to exercise and recover. You should have an overall stable mood for the most part. Like those things are kind of givens in my book.
yeah.
You should be able to function on that level.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are just kind of the markers for a healthy person
Yeah,
that I think we forget, right?
I
Like
know.
most of us are so used to feeling crappy all the time that
Yeah,
we don't even necessarily recognize how we're supposed to feel just on a normal basis, which is so crazy.
yeah, it is. So
So,
that's
at
kind
what
of,
point do you recommend like HRTs?
yeah. So hormone replacement therapy, I think, should be mandatory if I were in charge of the world, and any female at perimenopause, menopause, the earlier you go on it, the better. You want bioidentical. You need hormones tested before going on it and during the time on it. Everyone does well on different forms, in my opinion. Um, but hormones are very protective. They are cardiovascularly protective, they are insulin protective, they are bone and collagen and skin and joint protective. Like there is a reason that in menopause, the risk for females of breast cancer and cardiovascular disease and obesity and cholesterol issues and type 2 diabetes, all of these things skyrockets. It's not becomes you become a little bit less active. Like it is, I would say 70 to 80% hormone related. The problem is if you try to use hormones as a golden ticket, hormones are not a weight loss drug. Hormones are not going to help you walk around the block more to get more steps in. They're not going to feed you healthy food. Like you need to have a overall healthy foundation for them to function optimally in. Because if you put
So good.
hormones into an inflammatory environment, they are going to create more inflammation. I
Really?
always say estrogen does not cause cancer, but it can influence cancer.
Yeah.
And so, what is all cancer? It's metabolic in nature. It's growth that shouldn't be happening. Growth happens in a insulin resistant state. And
Yeah.
so we're huge on, yes, hormones, absolutely. But
But
you have to be doing
hand in
things.
hand,
Yes.
lifestyle changes.
Yes. You
I
have
love
to be
that.
doing things alongside them.
I love that. So good. I feel like we could talk about this stuff forever, but we are out of time. And my dog is telling me that we are out of time.
He's ready for
So,
a walk. She's ready for a walk.
Becca, yeah. Becca, I would love to know what Chippy, get down, buddy. I would love to know as we're wrapping up, just where can people find out more? How can they work with you if they feel like
Yeah.
they need more guidance, more help? Give us all the things. And then
Yeah.
I will also make sure that we are linking to everything in our show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am mostly on Instagram. At the Hormone Queen is my Instagram handle. Makes it super easy to remember. So if you want to reach out to me there, that's probably the easiest place. But we also have our website for our practice, which is fitmomlife.com, which we obviously work with private clients in that practice all the time. So those are probably the two best places you can find me at. And then based on our conversation, I think the most helpful thing that I will provide is my hormone factor guide. I will send you the link for that. And that is kind of the initial cleanse phase that I talked about. We take most of our clients through.
Oh,
It's like
awesome.
a general version of that.
Oh,
So
awesome.
I will give you that to put in the show notes to give to everyone.
That's amazing. Thank you so
Awesome.
much. And
Of
thank you
course.
for all of this. This was so interesting and so helpful and so informative. And it's just so great to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, that about does it for this episode. Remember that you will find the link to Becca's website as well as to all the other resources we talked about in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. And if you know someone else who might be struggling with hormone issues or feeling stuck or like they're plateauing, please be sure to send this episode their way. Then, of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast to be notified of future episodes. And I will see you back here for another new episode very soon.